You'll remember David just told you that between the wars, America had literally a handful. They rejected the Continental Radial Aero engine, which they had been using against lightly armoured. The spec said they wanted it round about 20 to 25 tons. So that meant you could call desperate as well against the Chinese manned Russian T-34-85s. They were outgunned. It was only really when the British Centurions turned up where we then get an armoured butts back in our favour in Korea. They fought in what was then called Indochina, French Indochina, and the French were trying to fight the Viet Minh, and famously the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Bits of Iran had a lot of things in favour. Equally, the size of a small house, not an easy thing to hide, particularly in the desert where the British first used them in construction. You'll notice, if you look very closely at havoc of the early marks of Sherman, that they were prone to being penetrated and prone to fire. That was partly to do with poor ammunition stowage, which was poor weight in major marks, and of course they adding extra armor PKR on the outside. The other major criticism was the gun, 75mm there, was perfectly adequate in 1942, but the Sherman was kind of confusing when you look at the story of the Sherman, because each particular mark continued to be made by whoever was making it. So the A1s were still being produced towards the end of the war. It wasn't the case of A1, A2, A3, A1, anything simple like that. Right? And in fact, see both moving off there, we were able to use our A2 and replicate the A3 T8. Many productions became standard the A3, but there is no running A3 available. So our A2 studied for T8. There was the Sherman Tommy Cooker once, as the British tended to call it. The early ones didn't have this problem. And the important thing is they were never really intended to be a exploitative vehicle. Much more than the enemy line, generally, feed in your fast, exploitative tanks who then rampage around in the rear of the German. This is what this is designed to do. To do 20 miles an hour across country, that's pretty good. That's pretty good for a tank of the size. Its weight and armour was limited by the Americans, who wanted to keep it down to around about 30 tons so they could ship it easily. So you couldn't up-armour it terribly well. You'll notice Fury here, which got wooden battles along the side. People often imagine that's for getting it out of, but it's not. It's to defeat hollow-charged German anti-tank rockets like the Panzerfaust, Panzerschreck, right, which will explode on the outside of the wood. Easy to replace the wood, less easy to replace the tank and the crew. So, fire so much. What had its favour was the important thing. The Sherman had going for it was always number one. Now, I'm going to pass on to my colleague David, who's going to take on another.
Monkeys about their Navy, their Air Force. They are just going to make an enormous amount of artillery shells, tubes to launch those artillery shells, and tanks. That's going to be the Russian way of war. Stalin basically leans forward, coughs politely and says, I think you ought to have this. Yes, comrade Stalin. So on it goes into production. Troublesome beginning for the Russians. They've had to buy in British tanks to copy. They bought in the American Christie tanks in 1930. They're getting there with their production, building enormous factories, using tank production as part of their 5-year plan to industrialise the country. The T-34 is there ready in 1941 when Germany invades. Germany again in that period has had a pact with Stalin, their powers at the time. When the Germans come over the border, the Russians have just gone through a major purge. Stalin has this from Sherman. Many thanks to World of Tanks again for this, for making it happen that way. This is the second model of Tiger tank. It's developed almost at the same time as a Tiger 1, but it takes longer. That's because Hitler has said in May of 1941, I want you to put the long-barreled L-71 88mm gun on a tank. And first of all, everyone says, now, just like with the Tiger 1, there's the HWA, the German Weapons Office. They get two companies to bid for the production. Krupp, the arms manufacturer, makes the turret. Nothing to do with the designers, that way they design their own one. Henschel and Ferdinand Porsche's consortium, or his company, both put in bids. Porsche, he's got the ear of Hitler, but most of his military designs in World War II, apart from the Kugelwagen and mainly the Schwittwagen, are pretty useless because he overspecs and complicates things. He wants this vehicle, so it's Henschel that gets the design going. And forgive us if you've heard this all the time, but here we have a pre-production Tiger 2, and it's got that turret that was erroneously called for many years the Porsche turret. Porsche had nothing to do with it. Krupp designs it, they realise it's overcomplicated, it's got what they call a shock track, so this production turret is what goes on the main production tanks. First 50 of them have the earlier turret. And why that was a problem was you had to bend the metal, there was cracks in the metal, etc. This one's simpler to build. And we get obviously enamored, boy, isn't it impressive? That's a huge size of gun. The thickness of the armour never penetrated on the front on any Allied tank, it looks like in World War II. 2,000–3,000 metres, if you're hit by one of the armour-piercing rounds, nothing's going to survive that on the western battlefields of the tank turrets. So it was very, very impressive. The outside Tiger 131, the earlier model, and there they are coming in the arena together. And I'll shut up just for a moment so you can listen to those and see them go by. Military says we'll be ready in about 42, 43. Hitler jumps the gun, and so they're going into combat. This one it starts the Panzer III, the one at the rear there. Have we got an engine? Have we got components that can really deal with that sort of weight? So again, you'll have heard with Tiger 1s and certainly Tiger 2s as well, lots of early trouble with seals, with transmissions, with gearboxes, trying to cope with that extra weight there. But a really impressive lineup of the generational difference there of the early war, what the Germans were fighting with in 41, 42, then later in 40, we meet the Tiger in Tunisia, Schwerpanzer Battalion 504, that's where 131 comes from, and of course the story behind that one is brought back to Britain for evaluation. The French Royal Tiger, or King Tiger, it's got a very interesting story behind it. Again, at the end of the Second World War, if you're in France, what do? You scrap any of the enemy stuff. They put some Panthers to use in the reformed French army. This tank, composite of 2 German tanks, and it's kept out the way. It's only in the mid-70s, and finally they dig it out the back of the shed. It was really early days, let's use it for a bit of analysis, nothing much happens, and it ends up being sent to the French Tank Museum at Severs on the Loire River, lovely spot to visit. Sherman, when he was fighting in World War II, by a King Tiger, so he painted it, or had it painted by the King Tiger that blocked him out, and it looked like that, and he then repainted it, and go and have a closer look at it, it's over there during the break at lunchtime. But an amazing opportunity to see those tanks together there. Those are really the height of tank design, Every time one of those, the production cost, the hours involved with Sturmgeschützes, like that Panzer III at the end, but without, don't bother about turret, too much complexity, just put a casement on the top with a gun in, that'll take out T-34 will drive off. Again, it's got a very distinctive noise there as well. If you listen carefully, there's a tap, 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 tap noise as it goes along. The pins on a T-34 are actually loose. There's a wedge on the inside of the hull as that vehicle drives distinctive sound of a T-34. Lovely big aluminium block in the back there, diesel. Very simple, very reliable engine, but there goes our T-34-85. That particular one was made after the war in Czechoslovakia, and they carried on making them in certain other countries, Poland as well.